U.S. President Donald Trump and Russian President Vladimir Putin held talks over the Ukraine war, but analysts say the fighting on the front lines will continue. Military expert Mark Kanchan pointed out that while discussions were productive, there was no agreement on a 30-day ceasefire.
The encouraging thing was that they are talking. It seems to have been a productive conversation. It certainly went on for a long time. There's no indication of any rancor, so that's good. The disappointing part is that there's no 30-day ceasefire. That's what had been on the table before. Ukraine had agreed to that. There's a ceasefire against energy targets and infrastructure. There's a commitment to look at a maritime ceasefire in the Black Sea, then maybe a longer ceasefire, and then, of course, a full peace settlement. But the shooting on the front lines will continue. Well, Russia is trying to get a ceasefire where no additional military aid arrives in Ukraine. And that would be devastating for Ukraine because Russia will continue to receive its military supplies, both from its domestic sources and likely from the Iranians and the North Koreans. So it would greatly handicap Ukraine. And of course, the longer it went on, the more handicapped Ukraine would become. It's a condition that the Ukrainians really can't tolerate very long. One thing to keep in mind is that this peace process is going to take a long time. President Trump had talked about ending the war in 24 hours and then in 100 days. But when you look at the history of these things, for example, the negotiations to end the war in Korea, that went on for a year and a half. There are lots of issues to be hammered out. So this is going to be a step-by-step process. The next step is a meeting in the Middle East again. Maybe they can hammer out something on a 30-day ceasefire.
Russia, he says, is using negotiations to buy time while maintaining military supplies from Iran and North Korea, putting Ukraine at a disadvantage. Council on Foreign Relations expert Liana Fix criticized the Trump administration's lack of preparation, warning that Putin benefits from direct talks without making real concessions.
Diplomacy, JD, you are speaking about. What do you mean?
I'm talking about the kind of diplomacy that's going to end the destruction of your country.
Yes, but if you
Mr.
are not
Mr. President, with respect, I think it's disrespectful for you to come into the Oval Office and try to litigate this in front of the American media.
It's unusual for two world leaders to engage so early on in a negotiation process about ceasefires. We have seen this once. We've seen that in 2014 when Russia invaded Ukraine for the first time. The German Chancellor Angela Merkel has also engaged very early on with the Russian president in negotiations. The difference, though, was that she knew all the maps of Ukraine, all the details of the battlefield. She spoke Russian and she spent hours, almost 2 hours in a row with Vladimir Putin in negotiations in Minsk at that time. This is not what we see from the Trump administration today. There doesn't seem to be enough preparation on just the logistical and technical level to agree on anything. And there is, as always, a big concern that Donald Trump is open to narratives coming from the Russian side without having any access to the ground truth in Ukraine. The minimum that can be achieved here is a ceasefire. And what we already see now is that the Russian side is trying to buy time. It has not agreed to an unconditional ceasefire. Vladimir Putin himself has not agreed to. And he sees benefits for Russia through direct interaction with President Trump. And demanding that he would agree to an unconditional ceasefire, he only has to discuss some things with President Trump himself, gives him an access which he knows is usually beneficial for the Russian side. So he is getting all the benefits of trying to prolong and to stall the implementation of a ceasefire. We are likely to see this continuing a Russian suggestion that they are really close to agreeing to a ceasefire, but before issue X and issue Z on the US-Russian agenda has to be resolved.
With no immediate truce in sight, Ukraine's war-torn regions continue to suffer. Stay updated for more developments on the Russia-Ukraine conflict.